You know how sometimes in a game or an animated TV show or whatever, there'll be a character that runs across the screen and the background will be moving at a different speed and it creates this cool effect? Like the background moves slower than the midground, which moves slower than the foreground. I wanted to try to create that effect with an artwork. It seemed like a fun challenge to try, so why not? Today I'm going to walk through how I tried to tackle it, and at the end, we'll find out if I was successful or not. Hiya friends, Miss Art Garden here, and today I'm jumping into the world of 3D backgrounds. So here we go. So the background layer started out blue and dark, and I added a light source in the middle, and I played around with it until it looked like a good start. That was my furthest back layer. I blurred it a bit for, depth of field reasons. For the next layer, I went with vines hanging down with creepy dangling bits. So my plan was to have a silhouette in the foreground and the light coming from the back. Originally, I thought I'd do 4 or 5 layers, all at different distances, but then I went a little bit overboard with them, as you'll soon see. Then I added a couple tree trunks to justify what the heck-a-rooney the vines were hanging on, and I decided to block in some rocks while I was at it. I thought the layer looked too close to the viewer at this point. I decided to shrink it up so it was a little further back in appearance. I had in my mind this idea of having it in like this alien planet cave thing. I wanted the lighting to be kind of spooky. I thought I'd play around with establishing some mushrooms and flowers that would be repeated in more detail in the front later. I remembered to do the mushrooms, but then I was a silly dilly and forgot about the flowers. I added a little bioluminescence glow to the mushrooms. Since this is such a dark environment, I did want some color to pop. I started to make them orange, but then I thought I'd make the flowers orange, and then I changed the glow to blue. You can't go wrong with orange and blue being like good popping colors, especially together. I think at least. After I finished the layer, I thought maybe it's too much of a mid layer, so I added a layer behind it. Just some land shapes really that looked further away. I did look up the name of what this is called, and Google told me it was known as parallax scrolling. I didn't look up any tutorials on how to do it or anything. I wanted to see if I could just figure it out myself without being taught. I eventually realized that I had forgot to add the glowing flowers, and I could have gone back in and added them to that mushroom layer, but I decided to just add them in this other layer instead. All I needed was some blurry, glowy orange dots for now to represent flowers back here. Then I went with more vines because there's such a glorious thing to fill up the top of the canvas with. Plus, I was having fun making them with the dangly bits. I had been making the layers gradually darker as I got to the forefront, like closer to where the viewer is. I added a few more rocks under the vines and even took the time to give them a little texture, like there were some plants or whatever growing on them. I also started to name my layers random names at this point, just because I guess I was going a little crazy. I knew there were going to be a bunch of them, so So this layer that I was working on, I named Dodger. And then I had a sudden inspiration to add a little bit more creepiness by adding a layer of mist/fog. So I turned down the brush opacity and banged on the canvas until the fog rolled in. I named this layer Fogger. I wanted to put a person in front because I figured that'd be a great way to show the 3D moving space aspect of the drawing. My whole idea kind of started with just a character running across the screen, so gotta have a character. And since the vibe is kind of a creepy one, I thought I'd go with one of my characters that I made, named Marigold. She's from one of my comics that we'll say is still in progress. Now for a bit of a confession, if you couldn't tell, I was being kind of lazy and putting in the guides when I was drawing her, and it did cost me later. I had to make a ton of adjustments. Lesson learned, be thoughtful with your guidelines. In your artwork and in your life, I guess. I don't really want to preach to you on what to do with your life though, so I guess really I only mean in your artwork. One good thing about messing up your artwork on the computer is just how easy it is to tweak it over and over and over and over and over and over again until it's better. The bad thing is, I'm pretty sure art teachers are giving this video a stink eye for all my bad practices. By the way, have you ever heard of the game Frogger? It's this little arcade type game where you play as a frog and try to cross traffic without getting squished by the cars. Or I think there's versions where you cross logs in a river and try not to land on the water or you'll drown. If frogs ever become sentient, they're probably going to be like WTF on that game. Anyway, the name Fogger reminded me of Frogger, and that's where that tangent came from. As a side note, how do people stay motivated? Like, how do you stay motivated? Do you have any good tips? Especially like when you're super busy with other things that take priority, so you have to do those things, and then only have a little bit of time to work on things like hobbies that you want to do. I'm always so tired and unmotivated, even if it's something that like I really wanted to do. When I finally get time to do it, I'm just like, oh no, I'm so tired. Maybe this is just the cost of becoming a boring grown-up. I don't know. Let me know your tips. Let me know how you stay like motivated and pumped up and all that. I did the character sketch originally with all the background layers turned on because I wasn't really thinking of it or anything, but it actually kind of messed with my mind, I think. I don't know if I can explain it better than that. I was just sort of throwing me off just a little bit, but not like enough to really bug me that much. Oh yeah, also I used this character reference, a marigold, so I wouldn't forget anything about her design. For those of you out there that have characters that you design, like how well do you remember everything about their design? Or how much do you rely on references that you've made for them when you're drawing them again? I guess the more you draw them, the easier it becomes to remember everything, but pretty heavily rely on references. I'm always afraid I'm going to forget something. I know there's some people out there that think there's a bit of a rivalry between digital artists and traditional artists. And sometimes traditional artists will throw a little bit of shade on digital artists for being, quote, lazy or whatever. And maybe there is some truth to that. I will say that traditional art takes a lot more setup and cleanup afterwards, so they do have that going for them. I would say my most lazy trait as a digital artist is in the sketching phase when I just kind of messily dump the sketch on, and then I'll take the lasso tool and I'll just make a ton of adjustments as I'm working. Sometimes I'll even draw like a circle and I'll be like, you know, that's close, but let's just transform it a little bit. At some point, I do just want to save a little bit of time and not have to redo it and stuff, but maybe that does eat away at my skills. It probably does a little bit. I keep meaning to get into more traditional art, but you get so used to like doing digital art. It's weird to do traditional art. Plus I have no way to record it, so it wouldn't be like I'd have any kind of fun sharing it or anything. I started to draw her hand up, like touching her chest, but I just wasn't feeling it, so I ended up drawing both her arms down. I didn't want to like overcomplicate her figure on the foreground, but afterwards I thought about how I should have given her like a glowing flower to hold while she was standing there. I could have made it like a nicer looking flower. But oh well. In my story canon, I was thinking she had just walked into this bizarre place and didn't really know what was going on, so I don't know why she would have picked a flower, so maybe that was for the best. As you can tell, I used the pen tool to lay out my line art. This is like an old, antiquated technique I use. It makes really clean looking lines, but I know it's gone out of fashion on the art technique scene. I have one of those tablets that you plug into the computer and then draw on, but there's no screen. I'm just drawing on like the blank tablet, and then it shows up on the computer screen. So there's a bit of a disconnect with what you're putting down on the tablet and what comes up on the computer. And the pen tool's always kind of been like a crutch to help me get through the messy lines and the disconnect of that. I guess nowadays people just get like a tablet and use Procreate or something and they can just draw directly on the screen, which really does sound like a lot of fun. But this is what I have, so pen tool it is. Anyways, after that, I added some stuff to the foreground with her. I took a random brush I had made that looks like leaves and added some more, you want to take a guess? Vines! Just some vegetation stuff to fill out the foreground. I use a couple different custom brushes I made in Photoshop. There's a bunch of tutorials out there on custom brushes, but if you ever want one on a specific brush, let me know and I could make one sometime. I kind of went back and forth like how much I was going to color the character, if I was just going to leave him as like a black silhouette moving across the front. But I decided I did want to give her a little bit of color, so I kind of played around with the laws of the lighting. Plus we got all those glowing lights to help us out with. So I did start out giving her like a dark slate gray color, then I added a little bit of shadow. Then I started playing with the light, giving her a little bit of glow where kind of the shadows should go, like under her nose and under her chin, and those sort of areas. I was really thinking that the light source would be kind of like right in front of her at chest level. And then I barely touched on giving her a little bit of blue from the back. I figured I'd add like a mushroom back there. And then I decided I'll give her just like a little hint of color, like it'll still be kind of dark. But I painted her dress orange. I painted her apron kind of white. I painted her skin a little bit too light colored, but I make adjustments for that later. And then I just kind of tweaked it to try to add more of a glowy look to it. And I basically just kept adding shadows and lights and pushing it. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was making it look nice, so that's all that really matters. I probably should have done a little research on how this lighting would work, but sometimes you just have to follow your heart. And also sometimes you just have to get it done. So if this lighting makes no sense, then it's okay to me. I'm just a fun little fantasy setting, so hopefully it doesn't bother anyone. And then I went for the first blue glowy mushroom. I actually made this pretty big because I thought the ones in the background looked kind of big, and I was just trying to consider the scale of them. So yeah, big mushroom, not like super giant, but like, you know, pretty big. And then I thought it would be weird to just have like one random blue mushroom with her, so I decided to add another one, and I kind of made it so it looked like it was even bigger and more in the forefront. And just real quick, if you're wondering how I do this parallax effect, I took all these layers individually into my video editing program, and I had them move at different speeds. So the further back in the background, it moves slower, and the further up in the foreground, it moved faster. And I'm not much of an editor, but I figured out, I think, just kind of like gradually speeding them up or slowing them down, however you want to think about it, worked pretty good. Then I went ahead and added even more vines. Listen, this is the viniest cave you ever saw. Why not? I liked them. And then I added more squiggly vines on the vines, as I like to do. And after that, I thought I'd block in some of those orange flowers I wanted. So I put them on the vines at first, just kind of basic shapes of them. I did have a plan to make them kind of glowy after this, so I wasn't too fussed about their shape. I wanted to add a little bit more plant life around her, so I added some stalks of grass or whatever, and then that kind of turned into stalks of more flowers because I remembered I wanted one of the flowers to be in front of her. So I added leaves to them, make them look nice and flowery, and I blocked in with the same color. Why not? Just that orange sort of flowery thing. Listen, they grow on vines and they grow on the ground, and it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to look nice. And then I worked on making everything glowy, so I added some glow to the mushrooms. And I added some glow to the flowers, making them look all nice and pretty. And I did my finishing touches. And in just a minute, I'm going to unveil how the parallax turned out. So let me know what you think. Did I pull it off? Was it all just a disaster? To be honest, I think it went pretty well. Are you ready for it? I think it actually looks pretty good. What do you think? Well, thank you for coming and joining me on this strange art journey of seeing if I could make a nice parallax effect. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're having a wonderful day and you're taking care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!